The first sound wasn't her scream, it was hooves, and after hooves came dust. After dust came men. Ayla Dawson ran like someone who had already accepted she might die, but refused to die easy. Sand flew under her boots, the ground slipping away as if the desert itself wanted to pull her down and hand her over. Her breath tore in and out of her chest, shallow and sharp. Sweat strung her eyes. Blood stuck to the inside of her torn sleeve. Behind her, 7 riders thundered across the open land, their horses eating up the distance between predator and prey. "Come on, boys," one of them shouted over the pounding hooves. "Don't let the boss's girl get away now." Girl, property, problem, they called her many things. They never called her what she really was, a witness. The sun sat heavy and white above them. There were no clouds, no shade, no mercy. The world was nothing but heat, sand, and the sound of men who believed nothing could stop them. Ayla stumbled, caught herself, kept going. On the horizon ahead, shapes flickered in the heat haze, at first just blurs, then clearer. Crooked wooden posts, half-buried fence lines, the skeleton of an old ranch spread across a low ridge. Broken boards, fallen beams, rusted wire stretched between leaning posts. For a moment, she thought she was hallucinating. Then she realized barbed wire. Her brain barely had time to form a plan, reach the fence, get past it, make them slow down, make them dismount. Buy yourself one more minute of being alive. That was all she needed. One more minute to exist. One more breath that wasn't owned by the man she'd escaped from. Her lungs begged her to stop. Her legs shook. But somewhere under all that pain, anger pushed her forward. "I'm not going back," she whispered to herself. "I don't care what they do, I'm not going back." Behind her the men laughed. They weren't even breathing hard. "She's slowing down. Doesn't matter where she runs. There's only sand out here." One of them whistled. Boss said bring her back breathing, didn't say how much she had to be able to walk. They thought it was over, just another hunt in a land that never kept score. They had no idea that this piece of broken land already belonged to someone. On the far side of that same ruined ranch, Reid Turner swung the gate of a small corral shut and wiped the sweat from his brow with the back of his wrist. It had been another long day for a man whose life was made of long days. The Turner ranch wasn't much. A few dozen head of cattle, 2 worn-out barns, a house that creaked in the wind, a windmill that cried every time it turned, a stretch of fence that always seemed to break exactly where he'd just fixed it the week before. But it was his. His father had died on this land. His little brother was buried on the hill overlooking it. His mother had left when the drought came and never returned. Reid didn't blame her. Some people weren't made to wrestle a living from stubborn dirt. He was. He didn't know who he would have been without this ranch. The land was in his hands, in his shoulders. In the quiet way he walked a fence line. His shirt was stained with dust and oil. His hat had seen better years. His eyes were the color of the dry creek bed, washed out, calm and deeper than they looked. He was tightening a loose nail on the far fence when the wind shifted. Hooves. He straightened slowly, listening, not the lazy trot of a neighbor dropping by, not a single rider moving at a regular pace. This was different, faster, heavier, more of them. His eyes narrowed. He set the hammer down, stepped up onto the edge of an old post, and looked over the rise. Out beyond the broken line of his old north fence, the desert opened up like a bare stage. Near the center of that empty stage, a small figure ran, stumbling, desperate. Behind her, 7 riders carved a furious trail of dust. Reid's jaw tightened. Damn, he didn't know who she was, didn't know why they were chasing her. But he knew the look of a hunt when he saw one. He also knew that out here in the West, men didn't bring 7 guns to retrieve something innocent. For half a second, the practical part of him whispered, "Stay out of it. You've got cattle. You've got problems enough. Turn around, fix the fence, pretend you didn't see a thing." Then another part of him answered, "Your father would be ashamed of you. That settled it." Reid dropped from the post, grabbed his rifle from where it rested against the fence, and swung into the saddle of his waiting horse, a dark bay mare named Lark. "Easy, girl," he murmured, patting her neck. "Looks like the desert just gave us trouble." He nudged her into motion. By the time Ayla reached the broken fence, her vision was swimming. The old ranch wall loomed closer, weathered posts leaning into each other like tired men, crossbeams hanging by rusted nails. The barbed wire stretched along one section, sagging but deadly. She aimed for the gap between 2 posts and tried to leap over the lowest line of wire. Her foot missed. The barb didn't. Metal teeth sank into the soft flesh of her ankle. Momentum yanked her leg sideways, and she crashed forward with a strangled cry, her hands scraping the rough wood of the post. Another loop of wire snagged her sleeve, thorns biting into her wrist. She was caught. "No," she pulled back, instinctive and wild. The wire bit deeper. Blood smeared across the metal. Her ankle screamed. Her wrist burned. The more she struggled, the more the fence chewed her up. Behind her, the horses slowed. Hooves dropped from pounding to a heavy trot, then to a cruel, lazy walk. The riders' laughter returned, closer now. One of them whistled long and low. "Would you look at that? The wire did our job for us." Ayla's breath came in ragged gasps. Panic clawed at her chest, but fury stayed there too, hot and stubborn. "Don't touch me," she managed, voice shaking. The leader of the group, a man named Briggs, broad-shouldered with a scar across his cheek, swung off his horse and took a few casual steps toward her. His belt creaked. Spurs chimed softly. "Oh, sweetheart," he said in a slow, mocking drawl, "you don't really think you get a say in that, do you?" The others chuckled. Briggs reached out and wrapped his gloved fingers around the post just above her head, leaning down, inspecting her like a broken piece of equipment. "Mr. Kellen is a generous man," he continued. "He feeds his workers, puts roofs over their heads, keeps the law from asking too many questions. You should be thanking him, not running from him." Ayla stared up at him, dust and blood on her face, eyes burning with a hatred that could set the whole desert on fire. "I saw what he did," she whispered. "I'm not thanking a murderer." Briggs' smile faded for a moment. "Careful, girl. That kind of talk can get you buried real quiet out here." He straightened, turning his head slightly. "Cut her loose," he told one of the others. "Boss said she needs to be breathing when she gets back. Doesn't care much what shape the rest of her is in." A rider dismounted, drawing a knife. The blade flashed. Ayla's heart hammered. Her body shook against the wire. "This is it," she thought. "This is the part where I disappear and nobody ever finds my bones." Then another voice carried across the dry air. "I wouldn't do that if I were you." Everyone froze. The man with the knife turned. Briggs looked up slowly. On the rise, maybe 50 yards away, a single rider sat on a dark bay horse, watching them. He wasn't charging. He wasn't shaking. He didn't look like a lawman. He looked like trouble that owned its own land. Reid Turner let the wind tug at his coat for a moment. Then he nudged Lark forward, bringing her down the slope at an easy, controlled walk. His ranch brand, a small RT burned into the leather of his saddle, caught the light. He stopped just far enough to be out of immediate shooting distance, but close enough that every man could see the rifle resting in his hands. Briggs narrowed his eyes. "Turner," he muttered, "you've got bad timing, rancher." Reid's face stayed calm, but his gaze was sharp, taking in the scene, the trapped girl, the blood on the wire, the drawn knife, the direction the 7 men had ridden from. "Or good timing," he said. "Depends who you ask." One of Briggs' men snorted. "This ain't your business, Turner. Get back to your cows." Reid shrugged one shoulder. "Fence line runs through here," he said mildly. "This land's mine. That fence is mine. That wire is mine. The girl stuck in it is bleeding on my dirt." He tilted his head slightly. "Sounds like my business." Briggs barked a laugh, but there was no humor in it. "You got no idea who she belongs to." Reid's eyes flicked to Ayla for just a second. Her face was pale, jaw clenched against pain, but her stare was steady, locked onto him with a kind of desperate, angry hope. He answered without looking away from her. "Looks to me," he said softly, "like she doesn't belong to anybody." The man with the knife shifted uncomfortably. Briggs spat in the dust. "Kellen owns half this county," he snapped. "You think he won't come after some small-time rancher and his dying fences? You hand her over, we all ride away, and everybody forgets this happened." Reid's grip on the rifle didn't change, but something in his eyes hardened. "My father used to say," he replied, "land's not worth a damn if you can't look yourself in the mirror while you stand on it." He lifted the rifle a little. "Let her go." Silence stretched. A fly buzzed. The wind slid through the barbed wire, making it sing a low, ugly note. Briggs' jaw worked. "Or what?" Reid's answer was simple. "Or I start putting holes in things that matter to you." The rider nearest him snorted and moved his hand a little closer to his holster. Reid shot without warning. The bullet hit the sand so close to the horse's front hoof that dirt exploded up against the animal's chest. The horse reared, screaming, nearly throwing its rider. Ayla flinched. Everyone else froze. Reid slowly worked the lever on his rifle, chambering another round with a smooth, practiced motion. "Next one," he said, "isn't a warning." The desert held its breath. Briggs measured him with his eyes, shirt faded at the shoulders, hat pulled low, face brown from years in the sun, arms strong from hard work. A rancher through and through. A rancher who knew exactly how to shoot. He clicked his tongue and sighed. "Fine," he said, voice tight. "Cut her out of the wire, we'll take her." Reid's lips twitched, not quite a smile. "That's not what I said." Briggs' head snapped toward him. "You really wanna die for some runaway Kellen forgot to brake properly?" Reid's jaw clenched. His thumb brushed the rifle's hammer. "You walk away," he said quietly, "all of you. You ride back to Kellen and you tell him the Turner Ranch isn't his hunting ground. Or you find out how fast a rancher learns to aim when he's spent his whole life shooting coyotes off his cattle." One of the men muttered, "He's crazy." Another whispered, "Maybe." But you see his hands shaking. They weren't. Reid Turner was many things, tired, overworked, worried about next month's feed, but he was not afraid of 7 bullies on horses. Ayla watched this from her place on the ground, every word cutting into her more than the wire did. No one had stood between her and Kellen's men before. Nobody had said no to them and meant it. Her voice cracked. "Please," she whispered, not sure if she was talking to Briggs or the rancher. "Don't let them take me back." Reid heard it. That was all he needed. He nudged Lark closer by a few steps, tightening the angle, making it harder for the men to make a clean shot without risking hitting each other. Briggs' patience snapped. "You know what, Turner?" he snarled. "To hell with you, take him down." Everything happened too fast for thought. Briggs' hand flew toward his gun. Reid's rifle kicked against his shoulder, fire spitting from the barrel. Briggs screamed as the bullet tore into his gun hand, sending the revolver spinning from his fingers into the sand. Another rider grabbed for his own weapon. Reid's second shot chewed into the wooden post beside the man's head, showering him with splinters. "Hold it," Reid roared. His voice cracked through the chaos like a whip. "Any one of you touches iron again, I won't miss what I'm aiming at next." The horses danced nervously, sensing the tension. The men hesitated. Briggs clutched his bleeding hand, face twisted. "You'll pay for this," he hissed. "Kellen will burn your fields down to the roots." Reid stared back, unflinching. "Maybe," he said. "But today is not the day you drag that girl off my land." He jerked his chin toward the open desert. "Ride now." For a long, tight second, it seemed like they might test him. Then the man whose hat he'd nearly shot off earlier muttered, "Boss, he's not bluffing." Briggs spat again, this time with more blood in it. "Mount up," he growled through his teeth. "We're not done, Turner." Not by a long shot. One by one, with furious glares and muttered curses, the riders backed their horses up, turned them and rode away, slow at first, then faster as they gave the rancher's rifle more distance. Dust swallowed them. Silence replaced their noise. Reid lowered the gun only when they were specks on the horizon. Then he turned his horse toward Ayla. Up close, she looked worse than he'd expected. Wire cut deep into her ankle, blood soaking her boot. Her wrist was swollen where the barbs had bitten her. Sweat plastered hair to her forehead, and her breaths came in short, sharp bursts. But her eyes, those were bright, angry, alive. "You're bleeding on my fence," he said quietly, swinging down from the saddle. A shaky, disbelieving laugh escaped her throat. "That's the first complaint I've heard that didn't involve killing me." Reid's mouth twitched. "Well, let's try to keep it that way." He slung the rifle onto his shoulder, stepped closer, and crouched beside the wire. "This'll hurt," he warned, "but I'll try to make it quick." "Do it," she said. "Please." He drew a small knife from his belt and studied the way the wire wrapped her leg, the angle of the barbs. She tensed when the metal scraped against the wound. "Breathe," he said. "What's your name?" "Ayla," she managed. "Ayla Dawson." "Ayla," he repeated, slicing through one of the strands with a sharp snap. "I'm Reid Turner. This mess you picked to get stuck in, that's my ranch." "Nice," she gasped as he freed her sleeve next. "You have very welcoming fences." "Working on that," he said dryly. He eased the barb from her ankle, one careful twist at a time. She bit down on a cry, nails digging into the dirt. When the wire finally came free, he cut the loose piece off completely and tossed it aside. "All right," he said, slipping the knife away. "Let's get you up." He slid an arm around her back and under her knees, lifting gently but firmly. She sucked in a sharp breath as her leg shifted, grabbing onto his shoulder. "You could have just walked away," she whispered. "I could have," he agreed, carrying her to his horse. "But then I'd have to sleep tonight knowing I didn't." He set her sideways in the saddle, making sure her injured leg rested as comfortably as possible over the front, then mounted behind her, steady, and solid. "Hold on," he said, taking the reins. "To what?" she asked weakly. He glanced down at her hands. "Anything that keeps you from falling off." She hesitated, then gripped his forearm. The warmth and strength beneath her fingers were startling after so much cold fear. Reid clicked his tongue, and Lark started toward the heart of the Turner ranch. Behind them, the barbed wire still glinted in the sun, dust swirling around the blood it had tasted. Ahead of them, trouble waited. Ayla Dawson had escaped Kellen's men for now. Reid Turner had picked a fight with a rich killer who owned half the law, and whether they liked it or not, from this moment on, their lives were tangled together, just like her leg had been in that wire. The Turner ranch had always been quiet, not peaceful, just quiet. The kind of quiet that came from windmills creaking, cattle lowing in far pastures, and the long, lonely distance between one heart and another. The kind of quiet that made Reid Turner forget, sometimes, that the world outside his fences was darker, dirtier, and far crueler than the land he worked every day. But today, that quiet was broken. Hoofbeats rolled across the dirt yard as Reid guided Lark toward the small ranch house. Ayla leaned against him, not unconscious, but dangerously close. Every bump sent pain flashing through her body. Every breath tasted like iron. Her head rested against his shoulder for lack of strength. His coat smelled like leather, dust, and faint wood smoke, something strangely safe in a world that had tried so hard to kill her. "I'm not trouble," she whispered weakly, as if trying to apologize for existing. Reid let out a breath that might have been a sigh. "I didn't say you were," he replied quietly, "but you're thinking it." He didn't argue, which meant she wasn't wrong. He stopped the horse near the porch. Before Ayla could even think about trying to climb down, he slid off the saddle himself and lifted her down carefully, one arm under her knees, the other steady behind her back. Her fingers gripped the front of his shirt involuntarily when her leg shifted, nails digging in. "Sorry," she gasped. "Don't apologize for hurting," he said, voice firm. "Means you're still alive." He carried her inside. The Turner house was small, worn, and honest. Wooden floors scarred by boots and time. A table built by his father's rough hands. A faded blanket draped across a couch that had seen more winters than smiles. He laid Ayla gently on that couch. For the first time since she'd met him, he looked uncertain. He wasn't a doctor. He wasn't a hero. He was a man who fixed fences and buried things when they broke. But right now, this bleeding stranger was his responsibility, and he was not the kind of man who ran from that. He knelt beside her wounded leg, cutting open the fabric around her ankle to keep the barbed wire damage from tearing further when he cleaned it. Ayla turned her face away, jaw clenched, eyes burning. "I can handle pain," she said softly. "Just don't lie to me. If it's bad, say it's bad." He studied the wound, deep, messy, not fatal. "I've seen worse," he answered honestly. "You'll walk again, just not today," she nodded once. "That's the best news I've had in months." He poured water over the cut, washing away the sand, the blood, the filth from the chase. She cried out, the sound raw, tears escaping despite all the strength she'd tried to build around herself. "Easy," he murmured. "Breathe through it. First part's always the meanest." He worked with careful, steady hands, hands that had mended cattle, fixed wire, held back storms as best they could. Hands that were strong enough to hurt, but had chosen not to. After he wrapped her ankle, he moved to her wrist, repeating the process. She stayed quiet this time, not because it didn't hurt, because she was used to pain. And that told Reid more about her life than she probably meant to. When he finished, he sat back on his heels, wiping his brow with the back of his hand. "You'll need a day at least before you can put weight on it," he said. "Maybe more," she nodded slowly. "Thank you." The words were small, but they were real. He stood, poured a glass of water and handed it to her. "Drink slow. You're dehydrated enough to worry me." She took it, hands trembling slightly. Water slid down her throat like something holy. He watched her carefully for a few seconds, then finally asked the question that had been waiting since the desert. "Who's Kellen?" Her fingers tightened around the glass. The room seemed to shrink. "He used to be my employer," she said quietly. "Now he thinks he owns my life." Reid leaned against the table. "He runs stock auctions," she continued, "buys land, pays sheriffs to look the other way, calls himself a businessman. But he kills people who get in the way of those businesses." Reid's jaw clenched. "And you saw something?" Her throat tightened. "I saw him shoot a man in his own barn," she whispered. "Saw him bury the body and laugh about it. I ran." "He doesn't forgive that kind of betrayal." Reid exhaled slowly. "That explains 7 men on horseback." Her eyes met his. "You have no idea what you've stepped into." He held her gaze steady. "I know enough." For the first time, fear bled into her voice, not for herself. "For you," she said. "Kellen doesn't lose. He pays the law. He pays men who enjoy hurting people. He'll come for this ranch. He'll burn it for what you did today." Reid looked out the window for a moment. The windmill turned, cattle grazed, dust drifted. "I've been fighting this land my whole life," he said softly. "Not going to run now because a rich bully doesn't like me telling him no." She swallowed. "Why?" she whispered. "Why help me?" He thought about it. There were 1,000 small answers, but only one big one. "Because somebody should have," he said. "And because if a man like Kellen gets to do whatever he wants, this desert belongs to the wrong people." A tear slid silently down her cheek. He didn't mention it, didn't stare at it, didn't soften his voice. He simply said, "You're safe here tonight." Ayla closed her eyes. Safe, a word she hadn't believed in for months. For a few blessed seconds, she allowed herself to believe it again. Night fell, the ranch quieted again. But this quiet was different, heavier, alive with danger just beyond the edge of its fences. Reid moved through the dark house silently, checking locks, loading his rifle, setting an extra lamp near the window so he could see movement across the yard. His boots creaked softly across old wood. He paused once, watched Ayla sleeping restlessly on the couch. She twitched, murmured something softly, flinched like someone had shouted at her inside her dreams. His jaw tightened. Nobody should sleep like that. He turned away before he could get more attached than he already was. Miles away, Briggs wrapped his bleeding hand, fury boiling hot enough to burn the night air. One of his men spat into the fire they were camped around. "You really gonna tell Kellen Turner stopped us?" Briggs glared. "What do you think I'm going to do?" Lie, silence. Everyone knew the truth. Lying to Kellen was worse than failing him. Briggs stood slowly. "Get some sleep. At first light, we ride to town." "To bring back more men?" Briggs shook his head. "To bring back permission," he said darkly. "Once Kellen signs off, we're not asking Turner again." The fire crackled. The night listened. And somewhere out in the dark, a storm was beginning to crawl over the horizon. Back at the Turner ranch, wind scraped against the windows. Cattle shifted restlessly. The front porch creaked with the old house's tired bones. Reid sat at the table, not sleeping, fingers wrapped around a coffee mug gone cold. He'd protected her once. He'd do it again, whatever came. Because the desert might belong to powerful men like Kellen on paper. But tonight, it belonged to a rancher who wasn't going to let evil ride his land without a fight. And to a girl who refused, ever again, to let anyone lay a hand on her. Morning didn't come gently, it came like a knife. Sunlight cut through the dusty window of the Turner ranch, slicing across the room and landing on Ayla's face. She woke with a sharp breath, like someone dragged her back from drowning. For a second, she didn't remember where she was. Then the silence hit her, not the silence of fear, not the silence of a locked room, not the silence of Kellen's estate, where walls listened and doors judged. This silence was real. Wind sighed outside. A distant cow complained lazily. Wood whispered as the house shifted in the morning warmth. She blinked back tears she didn't mean to cry. She was still alive. Ayla tried to sit up and instantly winced, as pain flared through her ankle. Her hand flew to her bandaged leg, breath hissing through her teeth. The injury burned, throbbing with angry life. Before she could move again, "Don't push it." She turned her head sharply. Reid stood in the doorway, leaning against the frame like he'd been watching her for a while. His shirt sleeves were rolled, his hat off, his hair a mess like he'd run his hands through it too many times. A man built of long nights and longer thoughts. "You'll tear the bandage," he said, "and you're not going to do me any favors by bleeding all over the place again." She tried to smile. "Morning to you too." One corner of his mouth twitched. "That was my polite version." He stepped inside, set a plate of bread and eggs on the table, then poured water into a cup and handed it to her. "Eat, drink, then we talk." Her fingers paused halfway to the cup. "About him," Reid didn't answer, which meant yes. They sat at the table. She ate because he made her, and because hunger reminded her she hadn't been allowed to feel human in a very long time. Reid didn't eat. He only watched the horizon through the window, jaw set. "You stayed up all night?" she asked quietly. "Someone had to," he said. She stared at her hands. "I shouldn't be here." He didn't look at her. "But you are, and because of me," she whispered. "Your ranch, your land, your life, it's all going to be in danger." He finally turned. "It already is," he said, "whether you were here or not. Men like Kellen eventually come for everyone who refuses to kneel." Her throat tightened. "Then why give him another reason? Why protect someone you don't know?" He studied her for a long second. "Because you were alone," he said simply, "and someone needed to make that stop." Her eyes burned. She didn't cry, but she could have. Meanwhile, town wasn't ready. The people of Red Valley had learned one rule over the past few years. When Marcus Kellen rode in, you stood out of the way. His carriage rolled in slow, expensive silence while the townsfolk pretended not to watch. He didn't dress like a rancher. He dressed like somebody who'd already bought the ground other men walked on. Dark coat, immaculate boots, hat too clean for dust, eyes that had forgotten what mercy looked like. Briggs stood stiff in the sheriff's office doorway, hands still wrapped in blood-stained cloth, explaining carefully, trembling on words he usually used to threaten others. He shot the gun right out of my hand, sir." Didn't hesitate. "Girl's at his ranch, she ain't leaving without him." Kellen listened in silence. He didn't blink, didn't move, didn't shout, which was worse. Because when Kellen was quiet, death was thinking. He finally smiled, slow, sharp, cruel. "So," he said smoothly, "a fence-fixing cowboy thinks he can embarrass my men, take my property, and walk back into his day like nothing happened?" Briggs swallowed. "He ain't just a cowboy, sir." I don't care what he is," Kellen interrupted softly. "No one keeps what belongs to me." He turned his head lazily toward the sheriff. "And what does the law think?" The sheriff, an older man with fear hidden badly in his eyes, cleared his throat. "Well, Turner's on his own land. Law says," Kellen's gaze slid to him. The sheriff's courage died on the spot. "Law says whatever you say, Mr. Kellen." Kellen tapped his gloved fingers together. "That's what I thought." He stood. "Briggs, gather your riders, not 7, 20. Briggs' eyebrows shot up. "20, sir." Kellen's smile didn't reach his eyes. "I want the desert to see who owns it." Back at the Turner ranch, Reid stepped outside and scanned the land. He'd lived here his whole life. He loved it. But right now, it felt like a stage before a gunfight. The air held its breath. Birds avoided the sky. Wind carried something heavy with it. He checked his rifle, checked his spare shells, checked the gate latches, checked the barn chains. Every motion quiet, every thought loud. Ayla watched him from the porch doorway, leaning against the frame, not because she wanted to, but because she needed to understand the man who'd tied himself to her fate. "You don't look like a man afraid," she said softly. "I am," he replied calmly. "Fear is what keeps people alive. Pride is what buries them." She stepped forward slightly, one hand still holding the doorframe. "You don't have to be in this fight." He glanced back at her. "Yes, I do," she stared. "You don't even know me." He turned fully now. "And Kellen doesn't know me," he said. But that didn't stop him from deciding who gets to live and who doesn't. So don't tell me what I owe or don't owe. I made a choice. Silence hung between them. Ayla swallowed. My life isn't worth losing yours. He considered her for a moment, then shook his head. That's where you're wrong, he said. She froze. What? Reid looked out toward the horizon again. Everybody's life is worth standing up for, he said quietly. Even yours, especially yours, because men like Kellen rely on the world convincing people like you that you aren't. Ayla's chest tightened painfully. No one had ever said that to her. No one had ever believed that. Her lips trembled. She turned away so he wouldn't see. The sky darkened, not from clouds, from dust. Reid's muscles tensed. He didn't need binoculars. He could feel it. Hooves many, Lark shifted, restless. The cattle started moving nervously. The ground carried vibration before the sound fully reached. Then the noise came. Thunder without rain, hooves without mercy. Ayla limped outside again despite her pain, reaching Reid's side, eyes widening as shapes formed in the distance. Riders, not 7, not 10, more, a swarm of dust and leather and guns. At the front of them, a dark carriage rolled slowly, controlled, confident, like a king arriving to inspect his war. Ayla's heart dropped. No, she whispered. He came himself. Reid felt her fear and didn't need to ask who. That him, she nodded once. Reid straightened his shoulders. Good, he said. Now I know who I'm aiming at. She grabbed his arm. No, Reid, listen to me. You don't understand what he does to people who stand against him. He won't just kill you. He'll make sure your land starves, your animals die, everyone in town turns against you. He destroys everything. He looked at her calmly. I already lost everything that mattered years ago, he said softly. Only thing left is what kind of man I choose to be before I follow them. Her voice broke. Don't say that. Don't talk like you're ready to die. He looked at her, really looked. You don't get it, Ayla, he said quietly. This isn't about dying. It's about living with myself if I don't do anything. The riders slowed. The ranch shook with their presence. Men spread out, surrounding the property, rifles glinting in the sun, horses snorting, leather creaking. Dust rolled like fog. The carriage stopped. Silence followed. And then Marcus Kellen stepped out. He didn't rush, didn't glare, didn't shout. He simply existed like the world should bow. His eyes slid over the land, then onto Reid. Then finally onto Ayla. She flinched like she'd been struck. Kellen smiled. There was no warmth in it. Miss Dawson, he said pleasantly, as if greeting someone at a dinner table. You've caused me quite a lot of trouble. Ayla's heart pounded. Her throat tightened. Breath felt like swallowing knives. Reid stepped slightly in front of her. Don't talk to her, he said. Kellen's gaze shifted lazily to him. And you must be Turner, he said. I hear you like shooting hands. That one deserved it. Kellen chuckled softly. I admire courage. It's entertaining. But courage has a cost. Everything does. He took a slow step closer. I don't want your land. I don't want your cattle. I don't even want a fight. His eyes sharpened. I want what belongs to me. Ayla trembled. Reid didn't move. She doesn't belong to you, he said. Kellen's smile deepened. Everyone belongs to someone, he replied. Some belong to God. Some belong to fear. Some belong to the desert. She belongs to me because I decided she should. Ayla shook her head, tears finally sliding down her cheeks. I'd rather die than go back with you, she whispered. Kellen tilted his head. Yes, he said calmly, you would. The words weren't a threat. They were a promise. Reid's grip tightened around his rifle. Then it sounds like we're done talking. Kellen lifted his chin slightly. Take her. 20 rifles shifted. 20 horses stomped. Reid breathed slow. Ayla gasped in fear. The desert held its breath again. The Turner ranch was no longer quiet. It was about to become a battlefield. The Turner ranch breathed like a living thing, nervous, trembling, but refusing to lie down and die. Riders formed a ring around the house, dust swirling like smoke from a slow-burning fire. Guns rested in 2 confident hands. Horses snorted restlessly. Fear rippled through the air like heat. Marcus Kellen stood calmly in the center, black coat brushing his boots, eyes steady, smile thin. Ayla stood behind Reid, but not hiding, not anymore. Reid's body was still between her and danger, but her chin was lifted now. Fear didn't own her voice anymore, just shook it a little while she used it. "I am not yours," she said loudly, voice cracking but strong enough to carry. "Not a thing, not property. I'm done being silent." Some of the riders shifted uncomfortably. Kellen didn't blink. He tilted his head, studying her the way hunters study prey they've grown emotionally attached to killing. "You misunderstand, Ayla," he said softly. "I don't need you alive because I care for you. I need you alive so no one else thinks running works." He snapped his fingers. Two riders nudged their horses forward. Reid stepped in front of them, rifle rising in one smooth motion. "That's far enough," Kellen sighed. "Mr. Turner, I warned you yesterday's decision would cost you. This is me being generous. Give me the girl, keep your home, keep your peace. Live out your quiet little life fixing fences." Reid didn't lower the gun. "And if I say no again," Kellen's smile sharpened, "then today everyone learns what happens when a nobody says no to me twice." Silence fell. The sky wasn't cloudy, but somehow the world dimmed. Even the wind didn't dare to speak. Ayla whispered behind him, "Reid, please don't do this for me. He'll kill you. You know he will." He didn't look back at her. "I know what he'll do if I don't." His voice was calm, so calm it frightened Kellen's men more than any shouting could have. He took a step forward, rifle aimed at Kellen's heart. "I'm only going to say this once." The entire desert leaned closer. "No one touches her." A murmur cut through the riders. No one talked to Marcus Kellen like that, ever, and lived. Kellen's expression finally shifted, not to anger, to interest. "So that's your line," he said quietly. "One girl, one stranger, 1 minute of impulsive heroism that ruins your life forever. You must have loved someone once to talk like that." Reid's throat tightened for a fraction of a second. He had a long time ago, and he'd lost her because he hadn't been strong enough. He wasn't failing someone again. "That's enough talking," Reid said. Kellen nodded slightly. "Yes," he agreed softly. "I suppose it is." He raised his hand. "Take them both." Hooves thundered, guns lifted. The world exploded. Gunfire ripped the silence. Reid's rifle cracked like lightning, the first shot taking a rider's shoulder, spinning him off his saddle. He didn't shoot to kill unless he had no choice. He wasn't a murderer. He was a wall. He pushed Ayla toward the porch. "Inside, now." She didn't argue this time. She limped fast, dragging herself into the doorway as bullets splintered wood behind them. Reid ducked behind a water trough and fired again. Two horses panicked and bolted. Dust clouds burst. Men shouted. Kellen's calm cracked into fury. "Flank him, take the house." 3 riders veered left toward the barn. 2 cut right toward the porch. 1 aimed straight at Reid. Reid dropped the empty rifle, grabbed the shotgun propped behind the trough. Boom! A blast of sand and shock sent the charging horse skidding sideways and the rider sprawling. Another rider leapt off his horse and ran low. Reid fired again. The man dove behind the well. Inside the house, Ayla grabbed the edge of the window frame, heart pounding, tears stinging, guilt screaming. "He's going to die because of me." Then she stopped. No, not because of her, because of Kellen, because of men who think fear is a leash. She wasn't letting that thinking win anymore. She scanned the room. Eyes landed on a rifle leaning beside the door, old but loaded. Her hands shook, but she grabbed it. Outside, chaos. "Get her," a rider yelled, reaching the porch. Ayla didn't think, didn't breathe. She lifted the rifle the way she'd seen Reid do. Her arms trembled, fingers squeezed. The bullet slammed into the porch post inches from the rider's face, splinters exploding over him. He stumbled back, shocked, tripping over himself. Ayla gasped, half from fear, half from disbelief. She'd missed, but on purpose or not, she'd proved something to herself. She wasn't helpless anymore. Kellen watched all of it with cold calculation, not panic, never panic. "Enough," he muttered. He nodded to Briggs, his bandaged-hand lieutenant now riding with rage burning hotter than pain. "End the rancher." Briggs grinned cruelly and spurred his horse. He charged straight at Reid, firing wildly, bullets tearing dirt around him. Reid rolled, grabbed his dropped rifle, spun, click. Empty. Briggs raised his gun with satisfaction. "Should have stayed out of this, Turner." He aimed for Reid's chest. A gunshot cracked. Briggs froze, looked down. His hat flew off his head, shot clean off. He blinked. Reid hadn't fired. He turned. Ayla stood in the doorway, gun braced. Eyes blazing with something far stronger than fear. The next words tore out of her like fire. "Don't lay a hand on him, and don't you ever touch me again." For once, Briggs backed up. Even fear respects convictions sometimes. Kellen's patience finally broke. His calm smile vanished like it had never been real. "Fine," he hissed. "Burn it." The word dropped like a death sentence. 3 riders tossed torches from saddlebags. Fire kissed the edges of hay. Barn roof caught like dry paper. Smoke curled into the sky. Ayla screamed. "No." Reid's face hardened with something beyond anger, beyond rage, something deeper. The ranch wasn't just wood. It wasn't just livelihood. It was every memory he hadn't buried, every piece of his father's voice, every echo of his brother's laughter. You don't burn a man's soul and expect him to kneel afterward. He stood tall, eyes locked on Kellen. "You just made your last mistake." He ran forward, straight toward the man everyone feared. Shots fired, bullets grazed, dust exploded around him. He didn't slow. Kellen's eyes widened slightly. He hadn't expected anyone to run at him. He drew his pistol. Reid didn't stop. He didn't even lift his rifle first. He grabbed Kellen's gun arm, twisted brutally, bones cracked. Kellen cried out in shock more than pain. Reid drove his knee into Kellen's stomach. The Desert King fell hard into the dirt he thought he owned. Reid leveled the rifle at his head. Everything stopped. Riders froze. Horses snorted. Fire crackled. Kellen stared up at him, breath ragged, pride bleeding more than body. "Go on then," he snarled. "Kill me. Make yourself a legend or a criminal. Either way you lose." Ayla limped forward, tears falling, but her voice strong. "Reid, don't." He didn't look away. "You think this ends with me?" Kellen spat. "You think you save her? Someone else like me will come. There's always another man with money, men, and bullets." Reid's jaw clenched. "Maybe," he said quietly, "but it's not gonna be you." He fired. The bullet hit the ground an inch from Kellen's ear, dirt blasting across his face. Kellen flinched, not from fear of death, from humiliation. Reid leaned low, voice steady as stone. "Listen carefully," he said. "You're going to leave, not because I can't kill you, but because you don't get to decide lives anymore. Not hers, not mine, not anyone's." He straightened. "If you or your men ever come here again, I won't shoot to warn next time." He stepped back, rifle steady. Riders looked at each other, waiting for orders. Kellen slowly pushed himself up. Something in his eyes wasn't power anymore. It was fury sitting on top of defeat. He spat dust, mounted, stared one last time at Ayla. "This isn't over." She met his stare. For the first time since he'd owned her, she wasn't scared of him. "Yes," she said firmly. "It is." He didn't reply. He turned. He rode. His army followed. Dust swallowed them gradually until the desert was empty again. Hours later, the barn still smoked, but hadn't fully burned. Neighbors came, buckets poured, flames died. The ranch survived, scarred but standing, like its owner, like the girl it sheltered. Night fell softly this time. No storm, no danger, just quiet, real quiet. Ayla sat on the porch step, leg bandaged again, watching the stars blink awake. Reid sat beside her, arms resting on his knees, face tired but peaceful in a way she hadn't seen before. She whispered, "Why'd you really do it, Reid?" He thought a long moment, then said, "Because someone needed to teach this desert one more truth." She turned to him. "What truth?" He didn't smile, didn't need to. "That nobody gets to lay a hand on you," he said softly, "unless you let them." Her breath trembled. A tear slid, not from fear this time, from something warmer. She leaned her head gently against his shoulder. For the first time in forever, she wasn't running, and for the first time since he buried his past, Reid wasn't alone. The desert listened. And for once, it protected.